Oh,
Oh,
there
no,
we
there
go.
it is. Um, so I've been looking at grant applications, and the broad impression I'm getting is that um, we would probably want to start off with a smaller grant rather than trying to get everything we need in one go. Um, just because we need kind of credibility that we can be trusted with um, with the money, and
Okay, that's
that's
cool.
just and that's just general advice I've been given anyway. In things that you kind of the more grants you get, the easier it is to get later grants.
Hmm.
Um, so there's one I've just shared with you guys in Google Docs,
Okay.
which is a $25,000 one, and we could use it to kind of prioritize getting a running server that we think is secure.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I have no expertise when it comes to how much it would cost to get a secure website.
I mean, it shouldn't be all that much more expensive than what I have now. I think even looking at like, let's go to, we're just using the same host I'm using now. Let me see what it would cost. Um, we have to get a higher end host. So probably a dedicated. Oh, dedicated servers are $150 a month. That's a lot of money.
But I guess at the same time, $150 a month, sorry, excuse me, over a year is a lot less than the $25,000. So um, we could actually potentially fund multiple years with this grant,
Yeah,
which would give us
that's
some space.
that would give us $1,800 a year for server costs, which
Sorry, say
would
that again?
be. So yeah, so I just did the
No, it
math.
cost 1,800 years. All right.
Yeah, so just
Yeah.
hosting is $1,800, which I guess isn't that bad. If we're looking at 25,000, it's like we could propose it for 3 years, and then the rest could be sort of funds for us to keep doing more things. That would still
Yeah.
that'd be 5,400 over 3 years. That leaves 20,000, and that's presuming
Yeah.
also that this is the only grant we get. Like if we can get another grant that can kind of piece these together, then these other grants will end up, the amount that
That's
ends up being hosting is a pretty small fraction of them.
yeah. I think so. I mean, my thinking is that if we prioritized hosting and then hiring someone to kind of look through the code to make sure it's secure,
Hmm.
those would be the main two priorities, and then later grants could focus on less crucial aspects.
Yeah. Although I wonder, like, what are we getting with this at 150 a month? Fully
You
managed
share
dedicated.
screen, Mikey.
Oh yeah. Okay, so this is what I was looking at, the DreamHost. So this is their plan for $150 a month. You get dedicated servers. So right now this is the one I'm using for mine. I pay for the virtual private servers, which is 15 a month. So it's a huge jump up. But here we basically have a whole server to ourselves. Where these virtual private servers, they basically slice up one server into sort of these little pieces.
Although that said 2 terabytes, like that sounds like a lot, but that actually could be filled up if 10 labs have experiments with images and
Yeah.
Maybe by that's something we need to think about is that we should, instead when you've got YouTube trials, we should just kind of take away the option to upload images and make it so that people have to link to images hosted elsewhere.
well, I mean, we also talked about at some point, rather than buying our server from someone else, just setting up our own, right?
Oh yeah. So just building a server.
And I mean, $25,000, you could dump $10,000 into building a really expensive machine.
Yeah.
And I mean, if we built our own, you think we'd have a lot better capacity in terms of much more than 2 terabytes, you reckon?
Let's see.
Yeah.
I think Rackspace is the place that you go to, where they will sell you essentially a spot in their big sort of server farm. How much is dedicated hosting here? I mean, I get worried when I see all these and no cost. The more features they show me before they show me the price tells me that they're preparing me for sticker shock. Oh yeah, and when the prices chat with us. It's like, how much is that car? Well, let's have a conversation. It's like, oh, that's too much for me. Let's see what it says here. Oh no, they're just gonna send it straight to chat. All right, I'll kick out of that. So I guess we can explore options. So let's just start building as that Google Doc. So yeah, I guess option one. Let's not even number them. Let's just write like these are just different. So there's like DreamHost. I really need to learn how to type. Pray that it hasn't hurt me more yet. Okay, so what are our other options here? I guess lookup Rackspace. All these would be things you have to see the cost of. I mean, in the long run, I would imagine. Oh, Tyson's been kicked off.
Yeah, but he's just joined your the Google Doc.
Oh, he did? Oh, let's tell him.
Now he's back.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so if we think in the long run, it does seem like it would. I mean, assuming it's not too expensive to rent one of these spots on a server farm, it would probably be a good deal to build our own server because we could build it, crazy, put tons of RAM in there, and not have to pay a recurring monthly fee.
I think in a way I would kind of want to do that later stage. Because that involves if we had that as kind of slowly moved over to having our own servers that we built, that seems like a stable way to go. Whereas I'd be worried if we try to start with something we've built ourselves from the onset. Maybe just because I don't know much about buildings, I know nothing about building servers. That I would worry about what could go wrong.
Yeah, that is true.
Whereas if we built the expertise whilst working through a loan server and then moved over to that over time, then it might be a bit more stable by the time we are using our own servers.
Yeah, and with the sort of managed monthly hosting, it's a lot more manageable because we don't take a huge upfront hit in the funds. We sort of are dripping out funds. We can keep us going longer while we look for more grants. Because $150 a month is not bad, but if we're looking at this is $3,000 day one, and we don't know what goes wrong or if it breaks, that might be more risky. That does sound like a future thing.
Okay, so for now, I guess we could say maybe ask for 5 years, or what are the numbers looking like? With 5 years, that's about $5,000.
So this was 5,400 is 3 years, so that's
3 years. Well, 3 years should be enough time. We should get another grant. Well, we should get another grant.
We hope somehow we can get another grant.
Yeah.
I think that is a good proposal to be like, okay, well, this is how much it costs, and we know day one how much it costs. And it'd be over a 3-year period. Although I like the other plans you were mentioning of like, we need to find some way that this can somehow sustain itself, like without grant funding. It'd be nice if we can pitch it as, okay, here's a way we can try to get it off the ground, that it'll generate enough money to keep itself going.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I was initially thinking more of the larger grants, because then we could potentially use the funding to help us get us work on things that make it sustainable.
Yeah.
It's just either in terms of what we might need further is we need to make sure that we've got an automated system. What we need basically to do a lot of legwork to make, we have to be in quite wide use by the time we start charging commission for participant recruitment, for example. And so I think that's something which we need kind of lay the groundwork for, and have it so that a lot of universities, when we get to the point where a lot of universities are using Collector, then we can start adding the option that we facilitate participant recruitments. But I don't think we can do that imminently.
Yeah, that's still a little ways off. Although, I mean, so once we have 2.0 done, the big thing to do is just like get it to everybody. I mean, as many people as we can, just like meet people here and there, do Google Hangouts. Like that's a pretty common way to sort of promote new software. It's like, hey, we want to talk to your lab. Give us an hour. We'll just go on and hang out with your whole lab. Let us show you some stuff.
Mm. Yeah, I was thinking I was kind of trying to, if we kind of went around basically, yeah, communicating to other labs, maybe going visiting some universities,
Hmm.
just getting presentations on Collector. That'd be a nice step. Um, then I think if we're, in terms of with this grant proposal, would we, do you think just under 20 grand would be enough for hiring some people to, or someone to look through the code and to make sure, or to make it secure?
I'm trying to think. I mean, so it depends, I guess, who you end up getting. Like, you can get very expensive with programmers, but I wonder if we can find. I kind of want to just try to mine our CS department and be like, hey,
Yeah,
who
I mean,
wants
we always
projects
find
to
people
do?
that are interested in open source projects who's willing to do it, sort of like we're doing it for free.
Yeah. And especially like, undergrads, it's a decent enough thing to be like, yeah, this builds a resume and this also just, gives you some sort of experience working on a project that isn't just homework. Plus, it's
Mm.
for the good of science, which is always a nice, like, I mean, it's kind of, I think, what got Tyson in. It's what initially got me into this. It's like, yeah, I like this idea that we're making a cool science tool that other scientists can use for free, or at least very, very low cost relative to what they have available now.
I mean, that would be cool if we can kind of, if you think the people in computer science are willing and able to kind of look to help with this.
I mean, I think we'd be able to find some people, like if we just start like putting up flyers into the CS department. I mean, I got all my RAs through the UC Psychology at UCLA has a program where you can be a research assistant and gain credit for it. So I got all those people by just putting up a thing saying, "Hey, we're making a science tool, and if you have any programming experience, come talk to us."
Okay.
Adam looks like
Uh,
he's trying to hide his identity.
Oh, no. Just really tired. Been working on this
um,
lab thing all day, all
Um,
night, etc. So, you guys gonna talk about the grant right now?
yeah. I mean,
Alright.
yeah, we were telling you, Adam, if you want, we can just meet later. So we can talk about this
I know.
stuff and then fill
I
you
don't know if
in.
we'll be able to because, like I said, I got a house guest, so I'm supposed to
Mm.
like do shit with them.
Oh, no fun.
So, I mean, we could do it right now if you want, or not. I don't care.
I vote for later then, because I think, Tyson, you think it'll take more than half an hour?
Uh, it might, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say use your time, finish your work, and then we'll find a time to meet sometime over the next few days.
All right. See you guys later.
All right, good luck, Adam.
Thanks.
See ya. That felt like a very like CIA drop-in message, like some sort of dead drop with the hand signals, activating some sort of KGB network.
is it dumb to think of having multiple servers just as a kind of, if for whatever reason one stops, then we've got backup, or is that kind
I mean, I think ideally we would have that.
Hmm.
Like that's how
Although
bigger
part of that
operations end up working.
that DreamHost guarantee was, didn't it say that it's guaranteed 100% runtime?
Oh, is it? Let's see. It's a bold claim.
I thought it said something about
Um,
something like that.
RAID 1, Ubuntu.
Yeah, network uptime guaranteed.
Okay. Oh, then that kind of deals with that issue.
Although, so we still want to worry about things like ping time. So if we're talking about this being a not just one location, like everyone's going to be using these servers, you have to think pings from the UK to US servers are going to be necessarily longer. Although I don't know if they'd be prohibitively longer that it would make it difficult to use. Like it shouldn't be
Hmm.
because transit times across the ocean are like on the order of like milliseconds. Shouldn't be that different being in the UK versus being here, but I don't know how that really impacts performance.
I mean, the time, the experiments themselves aren't so refined in terms of the timings in which trials are presented. So it's not that we need to the millisecond accuracy in terms of when one trial is presented following relative to the next trial.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking like inter-trial intervals. If you're kind of waiting, I mean, it shouldn't be noticeable, but yeah, that's the only thing I think can impact that sort of wait between trials. Like you submit a trial and waiting for the next to come back. I mean, I don't imagine it'd be longer. Actually, let's just test like so I have my own server and I could just send you a link and tell me how terrible this seems to run. Oh God, I forgot I hid all my folders. So okay, there we go.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I made the root like. All right, so I'm gonna drop you this link in the Slack. So just try to run that experiment and see if it seems weirder than how you normally run an experiment.
Problem is everything I do is weird when I'm on video chat.
Oh, that's right. You're gonna have weird
It's not
bandwidth.
gonna be, it's not going to be perfect.
So I guess you can just try it later and just let us know if it seems, weirder than usual.
Yeah, no.
If it seemed unnecessarily long wait time, because it shouldn't be. I mean, this is my own DreamHost server running off the virtual private servers. So that's only $15 a month. So it's not dedicated. I have less RAM, I have less CPU available, but it's still running off a solid-state drive. So it should be fine. Like I noticed this is a lot more solid than the server we use to run most of our lab experiments.
I mean, I hate to suggest it right after we do so much work for 2.0, but there is the alternative of moving it into like a JS-Psych thing or like my conductor, where you kind of throw the information at them, let them deal with all the processing for a half hour, and at the end they send you back the data.
But that could be the solution. I mean, that could be what this money funds. The money could be we're paying for a server and then getting us over to a mostly JavaScript/Ajax solution. Yeah. Which, I mean, I think we can find ways to make our current kind of inputting system work under a JavaScript framework. Like you mostly did the work already.
Yeah, I basically did that with the conductor. It has procedure 1, procedure 2, stimuli. It can already do those sorts of things.
So we might be able to do that. Like we could even imagine keeping our whole login process, and at the end we just generate a JSON object of all the information we've built, send it over to the browser, and then the browser knows how to deal with that.
Yeah.
So we might be able to keep a lot of the existing code and not have to duplicate a lot of our work, but be able to say, okay, this grant is to get us from where we're at now, which is it's good for a single lab, single use type stuff, but we want to be able to scale this up, and the way we do that is move it to JavaScript, and that's what this supports. This supports us getting a server where everyone can use it, and then changing it into a mostly JavaScript solution so it can scale to thousands of users at a time.
Yeah. We're thinking in terms of what that cost is that developer time, or is there a specific cost you can cite?
That's development time.
Yeah, that's time.
Okay, I mean,
on a certain level, the change to conductor from collector, so I kept the input process pretty much the same. I made some differences just because I was using it as a proof of concept, so I wasn't trying to adhere too closely to what we do just because I didn't need to. But it could easily be made so that the conditions file, procedure files, and stimuli files look exactly like what the collector uses. Like we could make it use all the same shuffle functions, use all the same notation for indicating a range of inputs. And then the GUI wouldn't have to. At the end of it, your data is still a CSV, so tools like getData should work the same. So it's true that there's a pretty big change to the fact that rather than going trial by trial, we're going all the trials at once. But for most of our trial types, that actually wouldn't be complicated. Like rather than having at the end of your trial you say form submit, instead you do something like a trial end function, and then you just have to have like a core structure that the JavaScript knows, okay, when they say trial end, hide the display, record the relevant data into an array somewhere, wait the defined time for the ISI, and then show the next one. So there are a couple changes, and then you have to give people warnings, like, yeah, don't submit the form, don't do a window location change because we kind of rely on all the data still existing. And then I even, just to see if it was possible, I made it do things like, oh yeah, every 2 trials or every 10 trials, AJAX the data you've got so far back to the server, so that if they accidentally close their browser or they refresh their page or whatever, they can actually log back into their username and just jump right back into the experiment. So, the initial danger of going to JavaScript only is that if they work for 25 minutes and then refresh the page accidentally, they lose everything. Like, there's no record of it anywhere that they did those 25 minutes. But with AJAX, you can get those progress reports of, like, okay, like, I don't want you flooding the data with the server with requests every trial. So don't do it on every trial, but maybe do it every minute. Do it every 5 minutes, or do it after every 500 kilobytes of data or something. And then you can make the compromise depending on what the server needs in terms of, like, I can't handle this much traffic, so start sending your data back less often. And yeah, potentially if you refresh the page, you'll lose 3 or 4 minutes, but then you tell people, don't refresh the page, and most people do that. Like, most people don't have browser crashing issues, so you kind of just want it to catch it for, like, MTurk workers who still deserve to get paid, but you may end up excluding their data anyways. But, just to be fair to both people, you don't want to tell them, oh no, if you refresh the page, you're basically out of luck. So, there are compromises to work out that I've already got sort of in place with the conductor. So it's development time, but it's not as much development time as we've put into the collector. It's not like we're starting from scratch and we need to put 3 years into it. It's more like your GUI would work exactly the same. That could be moved over directly.
Well, it wouldn't. Would it? Because no, I guess it would. Sorry, yeah. Well, actually, I don't really know much about how conductor works relative to collector.
Well, the point is, like, we'd have to update the conductor, but what it's meant to do is basically everything is the same in terms of the CSV files. It's just that the trial types are written differently. It's just written. So, like, experiment.php is different, but everything else in the collector could be the same, including all the inputs and all the tools and get data. So
that's the thing with the GUI. Oh, so in terms of the GUI, in terms of the sheet editor, yeah, that would say the same. The trial type editor would be different, though.
Oh, yeah.
The trial type would change. But in a way, it wouldn't be. I don't see that.
But even that, the trial type editor, the way that would be different is, like, here, just real quick, I'll show you what, like, a trial type looks like in. Let's see. So if I have my study trial type, that's the trial type there. I have a style sheet for it, and that's it. Those are the only 2 files you need to do the study trial type.
Awesome.
So, like, your editor, doesn't it produce something sort of like this? Like, it would say something like object1. Like, doesn't it yours sort of create a template kind of looking like that?
Yeah, mine doesn't look very different to that sort of thing. So, no, for some reason I'm going to be talking about how, I guess we're using the simplest example, but you're talking about the issue with JavaScript is that it often looks a bit more daunting than the PHP alternatives.
I think initially it was, but then Tyson did a bunch of work to make it look better.
Oh, so yeah, there is like this sort of more straightforward. So, so I have these 2 files, and they get compiled into something that looks like this, which is still not too bad. It is obviously messier, but I've already written the way that this gets converted into this.
Yeah, I think. From what I'm seeing, it doesn't look like Switch. To be honest, it's not like I've invested that much time in this part of the trial type editor anyway. It's mostly the interface. So this wouldn't be.
But I always intended this to be the way that you create things, just because I wanted you to write HTML in HTML and CSS in CSS. I have to convert it to this because the program needs JavaScript running. But I always intended users to be working on this stuff anyways. So if your trial type editor builds this, and then the converter, it's it's a really straightforward process of how I'm compiling that down. I'm not even that many lines of code.
Yeah.
So if we look at, here's my experiment page. Let's see. So here I'm deciding to merge the trial types. So I mean, I go through looks like about 50 lines of code, but the bulk of the work is just like, okay, replace my new lines with something else, and add a couple JavaScript, return statements where necessary, and the semicolons where I need them, and yeah. So it's basically this does all that translating process. It's not bad.
No, cool. I mean, this looks great. I'm just wondering then, so in terms of broader, and terms I would proceed with the server, it makes a lot of sense for the server to be conductor-based rather than PHP-based.
I mean, it depends on traffic, because it could be that if we've got 30 labs that are using it once a month, like, we've had cases where the Cogvog server, which is a terrible server, is able to run 4 or 5 experiments at the same time. You've got people in lab doing a couple participants an hour, and it doesn't break. Like servers are normally designed for traffic up to like 1,000 concurrent users, and then just the way that we do research tends to be at most 100 concurrent users, and there's like spikes of 100. So like for the next half hour, I'm going to get 100 mturkers or something like that. So you don't actually have to deal with the same problems that a server that's just expecting constant traffic of people browsing a news website and they're just constantly clicking on links all over the place.
I guess I'm just not. I never understood except for the fact that we've obviously put loads more time into collector. If conductor got to the point where it's got the same functionality as collector, I was under the impression that the trials just ran more. The timeliness in terms of presentation was better with conductor, and trials were running more smoothly.
Yeah, I think I may have broken it working on a demo for something else, and then I didn't bother to fix it because not a lot of interest seemed happening for this. But yeah, so this is like these are different trials that just happen instantly.
And that's I mean, that to me is just looks much nicer.
Yeah.
Than with collect, where it's quite. I mean, it's not been a problem, but it does seem an advantage of conductor.
Yeah, and this wouldn't matter where you are in the country. Like you might have to spend a couple extra seconds loading it for the first time, but then after that, there's no server traffic that slows you down. You are AJAXing back to the server, but that's in a.
It's like its own channel of like, okay, well, here's my responses that I have, but the next trial is not dependent in most cases on what those responses.
Correct. I was wondering why the AJAX wasn't going to start down, but that makes total sense, yeah.
Yeah, and so what I would say is if you have to do things that require a lot of feedback and stuff, if you just build that functionality into the JavaScript instead of into the PHP, then you don't have, I mean, still, you only have to report back to the server when you're trying to save data. You don't need to report back to the server when you need to interact with the data and say, like, oh, okay, I need to rescore this, and I need to, I mean, even things like calculating scores, it would be good to move that into the JavaScript. For example, like my VDR, free recall scoring, like I do a lot of processing work to score all their answers. Like I look at, okay, here's the 20 answers that I wanted them to type, here's the 14 things they did type, match everything up based on string similarity through a kind of a lengthy process, that Levenshtein function, which can get a little bit expensive if you're just doing, like a 40 by 40 matrix of this stuff, or 20 by 20 in this example. And it could be that like the entire server spends about half a second processing the output of one person's trial type. So like one person has a test, and the server needs to spend a half a second looking at that person's test to give them a score of, oh, you got 13 right. But if you dump that on the JavaScript, then everybody's own machine does the scoring, and the server doesn't have to deal with that. The server just gets like, oh, they told me that here are the 13 words they typed, and their score is 62 points. And I believe them because they have no reason to go and edit that data in the source. So,
yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I just wonder why. I mean, would we want to keep developing conductor and collector in parallel if we were to kind of really push for conductor on the server.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the thing is that the conductor does, I mean, it looks nice, like it's running. It's got a lot of the stuff already set. But there are things that, for example, shuffle functions aren't in there. And I was thinking that I would just move the shuffle functions into the JavaScript, which, I mean, it would take a little bit of work doing that. And there are other things that will take a little bit of work here and there. Just how would we do this? How would we do that? And it seems like to get it up to where the collector is now would take a couple of months of kind of dedicated work, and it's always been like, well, I just want to make this experiment right now, so I'm going to make it in the collector. But if we had time to work on it, I think we could make the conductor totally viable. I mean, it wasn't too bad to make this. I made it with specifically the interest in how can we keep our server costs low. So almost everything that I could dump onto the JavaScript, I did. So, you know, like we have initiate collector, we include a header and footer, we have custom functions loading, and now we have a bunch of classes loading, and then our experiment.php page has two requires, one for the experiment class, one for this experiment require for additional functions, and is still like several hundred lines long, right? So we have a lot of code going on every single trial type for that. But for this one, even though we're only logging in once, I still have it so that the entire situation is, you know, about 100 lines of PHP and then dumping out the HTML underneath that. And then the first time you log in, you have to build the experiment, sort of like what login does, and I've actually just built that into this. So this create experiment, this does another 200 lines. So like login is wrapped up into 200 lines here. And that's it. Like these two files are the only ones that handle your entire experiment. And then the way that I record data is this process. It's not that bad. I mean, mainly it's my array to line function, which is sort of a toned down version of what we do. Like, okay, yeah, let's strip out the characters that I don't want writing into a file, and then just make sure that the headers are lined up. But kind of a bare bones approach. I guess I'm also doing this convert encoding thing, but I would even rip that out and throw that to get data later. So the whole thing was meant to, like, let's just put no effort on the server so that we could have a $15 a month server. The downside is that if someone has like a laptop from 10 years ago and we have a pretty complicated task, their laptop may kind of struggle under the JavaScript load, but I think that's a little bit less likely in the general population. Like for MTurkers, that's not something we have to deal with. That could be a problem if we have people doing it on their phone, or we have, you know, just you talk to labs and they always seem to have really
like this computer's still running Windows 98. Can I use this? You're like, why do you still own that computer? Burn it.
Yeah. So sometimes labs, just because of the way labs works, will have pretty old equipment, and for things like what I just showed, where I was just putting words up on the screen, that's no problem. But if we had a complicated task, you could potentially see a situation where if they could host all the complicated processing on a PHP server, they would appreciate being able to use all of their crappy 10-year-old $400 laptops to run it. So, for the most case, I would support this JavaScript transition, and I actually went way overboard on easing the cost of processing on the server, like due to the fact that you only have to load experiment.php one time. I didn't necessarily need to make it as streamlined as I did, because it's like, sure, I could incur a second of loading time for each participant, but that would happen once, and then they have it all on theirs. So there's even room to muddy this up with additional checks, and we can clean it up and wrap things up in objects, but the initial goal of let's make the burden as tiny as possible on the server, I think this is a pretty reasonable proof that we can, because it runs right now. It even it records data. It just doesn't have any of the cool tools. Like right now, I don't think I have shuffle functions, and I don't have any way of grabbing the data other than just like I could write another get data, but I don't have one in here now. But here's the data. So, here's the trial they were on. I only typed in a couple of answers. My accuracy is 0 for most of this. So,
I mean, I think to me it seems that a better solution would be pulling out only the bits we need. Like, I think you've taken it so far that it would be a lot of work recreating stuff we already have. Really, the main thing we want to get out of the loop of submitting to us is experiment. Like, that's where all the server lag is being incurred on the user.
yeah, because we can handle a second of lag at login, because we only have to do that once per participant.
And like you're saying, even with 1,000 concurrent users, over the 3 minute, if 1,000 users log in over 3 minutes, that's still not even that bad. They have a few seconds, of CPU time per login, which would almost never happen to get 1,000 in 3 minutes. And if it does, by then this thing is a wild success, and we're making money off of it, and then the costs don't matter nearly as much.
Yeah.
So it seems like if we could find a way to just get to the end of login and replace the hooking into experiment with here's how you hook into a JavaScript version of experiment, and then the experiment knows how to send data back to the server, that would pretty much get us on as JavaScript as we need to be to really scale.
And what would be a cool thing is if our trial type editor was really advanced, then to the point where I could do all the stuff that I want to do in the editor, then we could just have it know how to write the output in one format to PHP and another format to JavaScript. And then if we ever need to switch back and forth, then it's just a matter of okay, you just go into your settings and click PHP equals true or equals false, and the trial editor knows how to make sure that your trial type can be run on both versions.
That would need to. Yeah, that in itself isn't.
Although, I can, for things like custom scoring, you have to know either PHP or you have to know JavaScript, and I don't think we're going to invent. If we're doing our own server, then another possibility is something like our server is run with Node.js, which lets us sort of treat the server data the same as the JavaScript data. But in terms of ease of installation, where people just have to set up WAMP, it's probably easier to have just a bare-bones PHP model for the server and jQuery JavaScript for the client.
Yeah. To me, that seems like the most straightforward way to pitch this proposal. Okay, we have a thing that is really good and useful right now, but it does require labs to do this sort of initial setup on their own. And what we'd like to do is get this money to fund the server startup and to fund our development to get it from off of PHP per trial type to JavaScript per trial type. And that would allow us to scale to much more users, and then we'd make it available to people.
Plus, we can use the funding to sort of explain. If we have a little bit of funding, then we'll probably just get a server, and since it doesn't seem like people are too interested, then we'll just stay on the PHP model because that would never overtax our server. And then if there is a lot of interest, that sort of justifies more funding, which would then let us switch over to JavaScript and totally handle the increased traffic.
Oh, that is a good idea, too.
To frame it in terms of this is the basic funding. If we got one level of funding, this is what we do with it. If we got more funding, this is the other thing we do. So we focus on base funding for the server, extra funding for research, development time on JavaScript.
Yeah.
That sounds good for me.
So that sounds like a good way to go, at least initially, because at least we can show them, hey, we have a thing that's already working and people are using it. Although imperative to all of this is getting 2.0 out and just seeing adoption going up. Hey, look, new labs are starting this.
Although the limitation on adoption is documentation. I don't think it's features. People are. I use Collector Master with people still, and they're happy with it.
Really?
Yeah,
I haven't used Master in so long. I don't even remember how it works anymore. When people ask me, they're how do I fix this? And they show me their files. I'm like, oh, God, go to the new version.
Yeah, I still use Master. So just the navigating through the extra experiment branches is let's just have everything be self-contained.
But I think that's why the first thing we need to do is just get 2.0 finished in a state where it's this is now ready to use, and then we can stop teaching Master. Because I think an impediment is as we break our user base up, it's just harder to make pitches that, this is where everyone's at, because people are on versions that they don't know how to use what we're doing now. Or the new features we're making aren't going to people because they're still on old versions. Because the new thing doesn't have everything.
I'll switch to multiple branches when we've pushed that to master, but I don't want to use dev on. I mean, I use dev if I need one of the newer features, like
Yeah.
what are some of the things that we've done? I know I was setting up. I think it was like we had some more JavaScript fixes, and I needed dev to do something like that. But I like just I'll use master, and it's the same way for a year, and then we eventually make a huge update to master, and then it's the same way for 2 years, and then we'll make more updates to master, and it's the same for 2 years, and that way I have to know 3 versions of the collector rather than 45.
Oh god, I only know one. I know dev. I tell everyone to use it. Although right now, so it's problematic because it's like, well, there's no way to get data out of it. It's like, okay, that's huge. So we need to finish get data, and then we need to get. I think from then on, it's just like going out to users, start showing it to people, and just keep building documentation.
Yep.
And I haven't talked to the RAs about what their plans are for involvement over the summer, but I'm going to try to rope in at least Allison and Elena for doing things in the summer. And I know Derek wants to do more stuff in the summer.
Cool.
So with these people more free, we can probably have more regular meetings, with all of us there and be like, okay, well, what's the plan for this week? What are we going to write up? What are we going to create? Let's make scripts for videos now. Like the demos have been pretty nice in that now we have a way to check if trial types are running. If we make changes, and I don't need to, hope that everything still works.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think getting a fully working version is number one. And then I think our pitch of, okay, what you're buying us is essentially a server so we can start sharing it with more people to just lower the barrier to entry. And then beyond that, we want to be able to use this money to fund our time to get us onto a solution that can go to a lot more people.
In terms of how much, I think the more specific we are, the more likely we'll get funding. How much time do you think would be, having discussed bluntly, how much time at what rate do you think we would be asking for?
I mean,
if we could work on it full time, I bet we could crank something out in like 4 to 6 months.
Really, 4 months? I think you can do it faster.
Certainly, yeah, but I mean, let's not.
I think
that was a conservative thing. Right?
As well.
I mean, if we were working full time, that would be a shocking amount of time, and it could be like it would take maybe a month to get conductor to where the collector is. So yeah, I mean, I guess I've never had a full time position working on the collector, but that would be a lot of time.
Would that be realistic, though? Because I get the impression that you're always jumping in and helping other people's work out, Tyson. So in terms of you being full-time, I mean,
yeah, if I got full-time funding for this grant, I would probably tell my lab that I'm going to stop being at the lab. So, I mean, it would be, I guess, a little bit sad in that sense. But if I was working on the collector full-time, then I would probably resign from my assistant position right now.
Or go on a small hiatus. I'm sure that'd be fine.
Yeah, I could come back at some point in the future. But
come back with goodies.
But yeah, I would be totally willing to work on the collector full time, and I would probably occasionally help with like if Mary or Catherine needed a task programmed, but that generally doesn't take that long because they're just doing VDR, and I've already built the VDR trial types. So it tends to be that when they need something, it's a couple hours of work, but it's not the same as me being here in the lab every day doing stuff for a bunch of other labs as well.
You could also just teach Derek how to basically program those VDR tasks, and they'd be like, okay, now you help Mary and Catherine because that's what they're doing.
That was actually one idea with the collector being so easy to use. I was expecting that since the RAs now don't have to actually sit with participants to run ePrime scripts or PowerPoints, that they could spend their spare time learning how to program or use the collector, but it seems like they don't. At least the RAs in the Castell lab don't seem all that interested in getting more involved than just signing people in through a sign-up sheet, which is kind of sad.
I know, you guys should be more stringent in your criteria for selecting people.
Yeah.
It's like if you guys don't want to do extra stuff, never mind, we'll find someone else who does. It's like because there's so many people at UCLA who want to be in labs that you can be pretty picky about who you actually choose.
Oh, is that so? I had sort of gotten the impression that the grad students were sort of just picking up every RA that they got, and it just tended to be like, oh, this quarter's RAs are not great. I didn't know that they were actually rejecting anyone.
Well, I guess it depends how widely you look, but like there was this event, I think last year, where they said, okay, well, it's like a job fair for research assistants where everyone showed up, and there were like 150 kids there for like 10 labs. Like
Nice.
it was the third floor of the psychology building, just completely packed in all the hallways with people. Like it was hard to make it to the room where I was supposed to be because there was such a crowd of people.
Cool.
I basically raised my hand and be like, I'm one of the grad students, let me in, and they all parted the seas.
Bowing and
Exactly. I led them in the desert for 40 years, and a lot of them died. Wasn't that great? I picked some good RAs.
got a couple keepers.
Yeah. But yeah, I think going to something like making a pitch that what we want to do is build this sort of JavaScript experiment part is good for what we want to be doing. It's like, here's how we can scale it. And also, this is partially just like while we're getting the word out and more people get used to using it, we can offer, like in the future, we're going to have this version that everyone can use for cheaper or for free and no setup for your lab. Or even very minimal cost. Like if we have a server, we could tell people, well, it's whatever, $5 a month, which is cheaper than any other server you're going to get. So in a sense, it's savings for them.
I think in a way what Tyson made a really good point there, that anonymity is such a big disruption to you wanting to use something that I would go for free to use this thing online, because $5 is just enough to make a lot of people not even try it out, even if they get better off with it.
That's always been my attitude, that, we talk about we can't be permanently grant funded, and I'm always wondering, like, well, maybe we can if labs are normally like you just keep applying for new grants every couple of years. If we just kept on applying for grants, I mean, just looking at the OSF and they got $3 million like at the same time. If we got $3 million stretched out over 20 years, it's like, oh, perfect. Just kept up every 2 years applying for more grants and just explaining that, like, yep, it looks like the last 2 years lots of people have been using Collector, so let's keep this up. Then it's
I mean, the thing is, if that is an option, I think that option will become more or less apparent once we've got those grants.
Yeah.
So in terms of getting the big grants that could keep us going, we need to get the small grants, I think.
Yeah, and I think even a small grant with a $150 server would probably sustain for a while, at least at any scale we're interested in, because it's very spiky traffic. It's not, we're not making Facebook. We're making a site that sporadically gets 1,000 hits in an hour and then doesn't get any for a while.
Yeah, because our users aren't like hanging around, logging in at all hours of the day, watching videos and stuff. They get told to come to the website, they stay there for a half hour, and then they leave and they don't come back. So we don't have to worry that the same kind of traffic that other websites are interested in. Like, they're not sharing links to us and lots of people are going to places. It's just like, no, people visit for a half hour and then they're gone.
But you can imagine cases where there would be huge spikes of traffic. So like WashU, maybe 2 years ago, they did some big study where they were just looking for so the HSAM people, the highly significant autobiographical memory people. I think that's the HSAMs. So what they did is they put out like a memory task, and it was like 10 minutes long, and I think they had 50,000 people do this task over a few days, and everyone was sharing it on Facebook. Like, I mean, I think the pitch was like, find out how your memory compares to other people, and you get like some percentile score. But really what they were looking for is a certain subset of participants. So there could be a case that someone wants to do something like that on this server, and they, have a huge social media pool and go like, hey, everyone run this study, and the study is a little bit taxing, and 2,000 people show up at once, and it blows up.
Yeah.
So we could rate limit people, like, okay, you can run, 150 participants an hour for free, which is completely reasonable for anybody. Like, even an MTurk study, you can just be like, well, I'll run a batch of 70 now, and then I'll come back in an hour and run another 70. So you might want to do something like that. You only get so many logins per account. But we want to make it a pretty high limit.
I'd be a little bit turned off by that just because I wouldn't know how to predict. Like, what kind of traffic am I going to get? And then if I'm trying to guess, I'm like, oh, maybe I should just get a different server that doesn't have this sort of an issue.
I mean, what if we say you can run 1,000 participants a day? Like that would be a load that's not too big, and I don't know anyone who's running studies at that scale.
Right. Yeah. I mean that sounds like it would capture everybody.
Yeah, it's like like the internet limits where they're like, well, you can technically you have unlimited internet, but we cut you off at 4 terabytes, and no one really hits that but me because I'm torrenting. Everyone else who's just doing internet stuff is not hitting anything like a limit.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of this are issues that if we have them, it would be nice to have them. Like if our issue is that the collector is too popular, we are in a good stance. So I think we should be less worried about that right now. I'm more worried about like how do we make this as useful and helpful as possible, so it makes
Yeah,
it
and we
easier
sort of
for us
have
to collect
answers to
grants.
all of the things. Like in terms of scaling, if we just want the server for 20 labs, our PHP model has already proven to do that. Like that's what we're already succeeding at. If we
And
need
that's running
100
off a really
labs,
bad server.
yeah, and if we need 100 labs, we just solve that with the better server. Like, and that requires kind of minimal funding. If we want to do 200 labs and a lot of traffic and bigger, more ambitious projects, we've already got proof that JavaScript solution is not too far off. I mean, it takes some work, but then that's why we would justify it because it's clearly popular. So it seems like we have a good level of, if we get a little bit of funding, we can work with that, and if we get a lot of funding, we can work with that.
And we might even be able to do sort of like a load balancing act in that we can just spin up. So say we have $150 server that is our main server. Well, we can also have, let's say, 3 or 4 other small $15 servers. And when you want to initiate your study, you say, okay, I want to run it. And we just copy all your files to one of the 4 servers. It says, okay, it's going to take 5 minutes for preparing your study to be run online. We copy it to a server. And now when you have people run it, it links them to not our main server, but some sort of offshoot server. And that would be easy enough to patch in at, when it gets too popular and we realize, holy crap, like there's a lot of people coming here. We could build that feature over a week. And say, okay, this is how it works now. You set up your study, you can do all your testing, but when you want to actually run it, you say, okay, I want to run my study, we copy it to one of our cloned servers, and now you run off that server instead of the main server. Or at least whenever we're in high traffic, like when we know it's going to spike, we can do activities like that. So, okay, if you want to run between these hours, you got to do this because right now we're getting so much traffic that we can't handle it. And some labs will just take the approach of, well, we can buy our own server and run off that thing. Like lots of universities will even provide it. I think UCLA will, and they offered us at one point to give us a server, but we just didn't trust that they would know what the hell they're doing. Because sometimes the university says we can do that, and then you get a server that doesn't work, and they're like, oh yeah, that's a problem. We just don't deal with that. So it'd be nice to offer something better.
So in terms of what, because I'm thinking if we, so I'm just going back way back.
Okay.
I think we could probably, if the two costs we're asking are just for hosting and then paying, giving Tyson some development time, then I think we could probably afford to ask for 5 years rather than 3 years, and then Tyson for 6 months. If we ask for up to 6 months, that would be. I don't know, would $15,000 be appropriate?
That's more than I make in a year, so.
I mean, I think, I'm just getting my head around the converting UK to American money. It seems
I think $20,000 is kind of a like what people would go for their first job or so, but I would be living with my family or something, or so like I don't have like living costs. So $15,000 for 6 months would be more than enough for me.
So you said 20,000 for half a year, so it generally would be about 40,000 for a year.
Yeah, I mean, I think 20,000 for an entire year for like someone's first job. Maybe for someone with a degree, it's a little low. I'm not sure. Mikey,
Yeah,
do you
that
know?
sounds low to me. That's 20,000. What's 20,000 divided by 12? I guess we have to factor in taxes, but that's only $1,600 a month.
Yeah, so it wouldn't pay for me to live in LA, but I would just live with my parents, and they would be okay with that.
I'm just trying to find the balance between what
Plus, that's 20,000 for a year, but we're talking about a 6-month period, so
I
that's
mean.
totally.
I mean, if you, I mean, it's easy for me to throw out the numbers because it's not me who's protects. But, I mean, I would think. I mean, I guess we could. I'll try and see if there's any guidelines. But if it's up to £25,000, sorry, $25,000, then even if we do go up from 5 to 5 years, that would be 8,000. I'm doing my math correctly.
Yeah, I think I did the math here at one point, and I switched it.
I think that's 9,000.
Let's
So it's
see,
1,800 a year.
Okay,
for 5 years?
150 times 12 times 5. 9,000, yeah.
Okay. So that's, the point is it's 15,000 is the upper limit. Yeah. So if I mean, I think you can make a reasonable case because you're a research assistant now. You finished your degree,
Yeah.
right, Simon?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So as a graduate, I think you can justify that salary. So I'd say. I mean, these numbers can always change later if we have any reasons about. Uh, and then I think that makes it quite we can at least be quite straightforward in terms of how we go and what we're requesting.
I mean, yeah, it's very nice to be like this straight out of the 25,000 comes 9,000 for this funds a server for 5 years that we're gonna make available to people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the good thing is, it's one of those things, if we manage to get the funding for development costs, that actually is just the sort of thing that's going to really help us for future grants, and that we gain credibility.
Yeah, especially because you can start throwing out those crazy like internet scale numbers of like 100,000 trials, 50,000 hours of something. Like it just looks like holy crap, a lot of stuff is happening, which would be true.
Yeah.
And it's like you're getting 50,000 hours of people running your study for $25,000. Like that's a really good value as far as the amount of money you're spending to the amount of utility the science community is getting back for that money.
Yeah. I should warn you guys, by the way, they're the grant that we're going for, they only gives it out to one group twice a year. So
Yeah.
it's not guaranteed. But at least the process of writing it will be maybe a learning experience or something else.
Yeah.
I think they do give you feedback. So,
Oh, they do? Okay, that's good.
And I think we keep talking about this server being, like, if we get this $150 a month server, it being a sort of small server. But in terms of how the collector gets used, I would imagine that it would be okay doing 200 labs for all of their MTurk stuff, and potentially quite a bit of their in-lab stuff. And you think, how many people are really interested in switching over? We may not ever hit the point where our server is insufficient for that. I mean, maybe we have some traffic issues if you want to test people in other countries, but like realistically, $150 a month server is probably not going to struggle under what we use the collector for.
Yeah.
So I mean,
And
I
if
wouldn't
it
even.
funds the JavaScript transition too, then by the time, as it's growing in popularity, by the time anyone really starts to hit any upper bounds, we'll already be on a solution that isn't taxing the server as much, so it'll just keep scaling.
Yeah.
So this could foreseeably be all the server needs to run for 5 years, and then we can just collect grants to sort of keep Tyson on working on it. It's like, well, he's the tech support / making new features for people, and then it's a community resource. Like people should be able to keep developing it on their own. Labs will be able to spin off their own servers if they want to. So it'd be a very nice, like, this is a free thing you have. You still have the ability to take it on your own, and you can also develop on top of it. So it should keep getting better just through the community using it. Like right now, we've got the 3 or 4 people working on it, and this is across maybe 4 or 5 labs that are on it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're talking about like 100 labs, 200 labs, we might have groups of 15, 20 people who are pitching in here and there, making little features. So it could get a lot better really quickly, or a lot more versatile really quickly.
And I think a fun model for making money would be that you get to use it for free, and then if you need help with a trial type or setting it up, then you can rent one of us for like $40 an hour.
Yeah.
And then it could be that, like, yeah, I spend a couple hours setting up a new trial type. That takes me less than a day, but still that generates like $200 for the server, and that's already a month. So
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, one day it works like, well, that pays this month's server bills.
Yeah.
Then I work
Yes.
tomorrow, and that pays for this week's food, and now I've got 3 more days to just make things better.
And because of the fact that we're doing this for science, we can justify to ourselves why we might take a lower amount. Like if we decide, oh, this might take 6 hours, but I'm only going to charge you, $100 for it. It could end up being the situation that we still work for not too much, just because the only interest we are is sort of supporting the server and making sure that we have enough time to continue adding new features. But certainly it's not like ePrime where we have to gouge people for $1,600 to get something practical done. Like we can still be in the sense like, okay, SurveyMonkey might cost $300 for a license for the year, and we don't want to get into a situation where we that they have to pay that cost. We can still say it's free, totally free, and if you upload your own server, it stays completely free. And then if you need help, you can have like an hour-long walkthrough where I just take you through the basics and get you started. That costs you $40, not that bad, and then you work on it yourself. Or if you really just want me to do it start to finish and your lab has money to blow, go ahead and send $400 to us. We'll totally take care of everything for you. So it is on the lab to how much help do they need from a person. That's how much they're spending money on, which is, really hard to say that they shouldn't be doing that. So, it makes sense to me. But
And it could support building tools that make it less necessary for everyone to reach out to you. Like, so I had talked about like ideas like a survey builder. So something kind of like how Qualtrics has like a GUI for making not a server, a survey.
Yeah.
So that would be easy enough to imagine where it's like, okay, click I want multiple choice, and then it pops up and you just sort of type in the boxes, and it knows how to basically just save the spreadsheet that Collector already reads.
Mm-hmm.
And now no one needs to know to ask how to make a survey because it just does that. And maybe they might come to Tyson and be like, I want custom scoring on the survey I made. I don't know how to do that. And it's like, okay, well, I can do that. It'll take me 20 minutes, so $20.
Mm-hmm. So if we think about a full-time job, so running the server for a year would take $1,800. So if it was $40 a month, that's like, is that like 400 hours or so? Or maybe about 500 hours of charging $40 an hour to get the total cost of the server in a year. So that's like, for 25% of the time, it would be us helping people with their individual experiments. And that still leaves, 3 days out of the week where we are totally dedicated to just back-end development. So it seems like the sustainable model is rather than in charging people per participant or per experiment, which we might have to do those rate-limiting things just to make sure that not one person is taking up all the resources. But in that case, we would just implement maybe a cap like that or just charge them or see what we can do. But we can also just get it funded through our efforts of helping labs that need help, but then people that don't need help, they get it for free.
Yeah.
Another source would be to have a donate page.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
So starting a PayPal account is really easy. I was just looking at that today. Plus it's another thing where if we actually do get donations, then we can point to the fact we've got donations as a reason to give us more money.
Yeah, we gave it away for free, and people gave us money back because it was so valuable to them. Like, this is how much it's worth to the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think this is the direction, too, a lot of people are going to be moving. Like, I think a lot of people are starting to talk about, like, hey, maybe we should use new technologies in our studies. And pretty soon, it'll be more apparent that, hey, the internet is pretty fantastic for doing this stuff. Like, people talk to me and they're shocked at how efficient we can collect data relative to them. They're like, oh, our data collection took 3 months. And it's like, well, mine took about an hour and a half. Like, I put a study up at noon, and then I went to eat lunch and came back and I analyzed my data. So it's like, this is a whole new way to do science. And I think as people start seeing other labs that they're used to, reading from, and they're hearing about how much quicker they're getting data, they'll say, we should look into this. And when they find out it's free, they might say, well, let's hire Tyson for 3 hours to give us a good primer on where we need to be, and we can start doing what those other labs are doing.
And more papers are coming out, like in journals, talking about how MTurk is viable, how JavaScript is viable for timing tasks. So there's also other more like methodological support for us getting published.
Yeah, I mean, it would be ideal if we can keep to the sort of donation / hire us for time type work. Because then I do like the idea of it just intrinsically being, if you don't have any money and you're a grad student, you don't have any funds, you can still use this thing. Like, we're not going to...
Yeah, we're using PHP and JavaScript. You can look it up for free. That's how I learned how to do it. If you need a little bit of help, you can ask me for like an hour-long tutorial, and maybe we could even say the first hour is free, where I go through... I could even post lessons. Like, I just record myself, like, here's an hour explaining how to use the collector. Here's an hour explaining how to use the basics of PHP to rearrange, your Q answer on the page and make a different type of study trial type. I could have a couple hour-long lesson plans, and for someone who needs to do the really simple tasks, they still get it for free. They just have to put in 10 hours of work over the weekend, but that's similar to what you're doing with ePrime. And then for people that need to do something really complicated, like my VDR thing before that got programmed, like that was kind of a complicated task, or making OSPAN was kind of complicated, or some of these other things, like, I need a lot of back and forth, interacting components. And it's like, okay, well, this person knows the system really well, and he says he can do it in 6 hours, so we'll just give him $250. That helps pay for the server that everyone wants to use anyways, and then I have access to the experiment for as long as I need it.
And we could even offer like reduced rates if it's things that we know are going to be useful to other labs. Like, let's say if I'm a person who wanted to do OSPAN and I don't know how to do it, I might be able to hire Tyson, and Tyson could say, well, I'll take 4 hours of charging you, but I'm going to spend part of my sort of back-end dev time making this OSPAN task, because part of this deal is that it goes into the main repo, so everyone gets it after.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the deal with anything. Like, everything on the collector is now open to everybody, so you can't throw something up on the collector and then say that no one else can use it.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of the opposite of the
Yeah. We're looking at some stuff, like the OSPAN stuff on their site. They're like, this is a copyrighted task, and you need to email us, and we'll send you a zip with a password if you want to see how we do an OSPAN. And, it's like, that is silly. That is opposite of what we want people doing. We want to be like, here's the OSPAN, and you don't need to know anything to run it. Just type OSPAN as your trial type, and now you can do an OSPAN.
Yeah.
And so I think it sounds like to us the main thing right now is get 2.0 out, and then lab outreach and documentation. I mean, the initial lab outreach is going to be more hands-on time for us because, we don't have such thorough documentation that we might need to give them more information. Mm-hmm. But at least that'll inform what is most urgently in need of documentation. Like the questions that constantly come up, we can know, like, all right, we need to really explain this somewhere else because everyone is confused by it. Or, the assumptions we're making are not what anyone else is making. Let's see, how do we... Oh man, these servers can get... Actually, I'm trying to see how crazy it can get. So with a quad core and 4 gigs of RAM, we run 150 a month. But you can get to like, I don't even know what you would call a 12 core. 12 core with 64 gigs of RAM is $379 a month. That's a lot of computer.
Isn't 12 Dodec? So, Dodec.
Dodecacore?
Yeah.
Sounds like a villain. That sounds like where like Doctor Doom would live, the Dodecacore. Okay, so what are the steps we need to take on the grant then? So, like, more concretely, it sounds like we're all kind of on the same page of what we want to be going at.
There's a little bit that I'd like you guys to check in terms of, I think, you sent me, I saw some slides, or I think you both sent me slides at one point, which had some information about how many universities are using it.
Oh, yeah.
So if you think that's still accurate, then I'll just look up those slides and put it in. I'm trying to think how it would work out how many studies have used Collector, because that would be really good to report.
I mean, are you talking published studies? Because I mean, if we were talking unpublished, like my lab has to have run at least like 150 studies on Collector, and
Yeah.
then the
Yeah.
Castell lab is doing a bunch. Like some of these aren't published stuff, but it's just like okay, we ran our pilot on it, and then we ran the second version, and this ended up being a series of 10 experiments, which we pulled 4 out and wrote a paper on.
I mean, I think it'd be hard to kind of. I think it'd be worth sticking to published studies because they can't really, they just have to take us at our word with
Yeah.
unpublished. So I mean, I'm trying Google scholaring this, and obviously collector is quite commonly used word.
Yeah.
So so finding it, and
But I don't know if
unfortunately,
people always cite us, so
Yeah.
that's a shame if they don't.
Because sometimes I get email from people I'm not even sure who they are, and they're like, "So I'm using Collector, and I had a question about this." I'm like, I'm not even sure how they know about it, but okay, what do you want to know? And I just tell them.
I mean, that's the thing. We don't really know. Because the thing is, they don't always cite you, Mikey. Like you know how you might have it in the references section.
Yeah.
So if we don't even have that as a way of kind of shortlisting citations, or I mean, do you guys? Uh, I don't know, I just be thinking off the top of my head in terms of. Um, I mean, Thais, you both are in papers that are published. So
mhm.
Like
could
all
you?
of Sharon's stuff, all of Veronica's stuff, most of the Castell stuff in like the past 3 or 4 years, right?
Yeah. And then I guess I'm on that paper with Nick for the replication. That's a pretty high impact one that was
Uh,
collector based.
that was what, Sex Science?
Yeah.
Paulo Carvalho, some of his more recent stuff has been in Collector. Caleb Vaughn's newest papers. So I guess Nate's also on those papers, Nate Cornell. Have you heard anything back from the Lieberman lab, Tyson?
Um, yeah, they still seem interested in the collector. So I've got a couple of people that have sent me something that they want to do, just in terms of surveys.
Mhm.
And then later Saskia wants to take me to the scanning lab so that I can see if I can get some sort of interaction with their button boxes and the
Yeah.
browser. And then if I can do that, then I can get keypress events going on the collector.
Because I imagine those button boxes are just generating key codes, right? Just like JavaScript presses,
Yeah,
like
I can't imagine that an input is sending.
anything special.
Yeah, it's not like, okay, I'm expecting perhaps in the range of 0 to 128, and then for some reason this button box is using like 4022. It's like, well, why are you sending that input? Like, why spend the extra bytes to do that?
Yeah, it's like just send me A, B, C, D, and then I'll map those onto 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm expecting it to be not too bad, but I'll be looking at that for brain stuff later. But I would say, Anthony, for a rough start, maybe Mikey and I can start working on a list, but anything with probably the Bjork name on it, or the Castell name on it, or Mikey or my name on it specifically is probably going to be collector-based.
Yeah, and most of the stuff with Sharon on them.
Yeah, Sharon stuff is also the collector. So Mikey and I can make a list of like what we actually know has been published with the collector.
Cool, that'd be grand. And actually, but I mean, I think actually it's not such bad form for us to say, give a rough gauge of how many studies that are ongoing using Collector. The more I think about it, it's actually, I mean, if, for example, it's over 50 studies that have been published, and we say we're aware of more than 100 studies that are currently using it. I think
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
okay.
so here, I'm going to screen share, like, just going through so this is the server that we use. So let me connect to Cogfog. So to
Oh,
give you
yeah,
like an idea of the scale of how many people are using this. So this is a bunch of different labs. So the Cogfog server, these initials are all different people. So we just use their initial for the folder. So here's AB. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like look at Veronica. She's VY. Where is she?
No, sure.
So that's just one researcher in our lab, and she has 90 studies.
Although
So,
some of those are template and some of those are survey generator.
oh, yeah, that's true.
So maybe
Hmm.
80 of those are collector.
But like, okay, Sharon is what, SN, right? Sharon, no?
Yep.
So here's Sharon. She's got 47 studies. And
Although,
like that snake study was another psych science study. Her and Veronica did that snakes paper.
yeah.
So yeah, I think we'll probably start going through our lab and just looking at recent publications and start just compiling. So at the very bottom of your Google Doc, I just wrote list of published studies, and then Tyson and I can start filling that out. And so hopefully that'll give us a ballpark number of like these are the number of published things. We can even maybe give like the number of participants for each of those studies, like just sum up all their experiments. So it can be like, 40 studies summing across those. We're looking at 60,000 or whatever huge number of participants, because we run big studies now. Like we'll take things that we used to do with 30, 40 participants and we do them with 100. And also this is a good pitch towards people who are kind of annoyed with the general problem of replication. Like this is a good way to run overpowered studies, or to stop running underpowered studies, because people run them underpowered because it takes an hour to collect every participant because you have to be there in person. So it's like, well, don't run 20 people, run 120 people. Because it's not that much more expensive when you're looking at paying in lab versus paying on MTurk. Plus, MTurk is, I think, a more homogeneous or a more heterogeneous population than what we usually get in our own labs. Like, you get whoever shows up at your university, so you get. Where with MTurk, you get like a random selection of a pretty wide range of people.
Yeah, I don't know if I sent you those slides, Anthony, but I actually had that talk about why MTurk is good for science. And it talks about like how the population's more diverse. Did I ever send that to you?
I think you both sent it to me. I vaguely remember getting 2 versions of it. I might use that as a basis for just elaborating on why the advantages of promoting collector.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm actually.
I think another nice pitch we have is that it does standardize a lot of data recording and data sharing. Like right now, when you get data files back from people, it's like I don't know what the hell way everyone's got their own little scheme of doing stuff in Excel. Like, and I've gotten raw data from people when you ask for it, and I don't know how to make heads or tails of it. Where if someone sends me their collector experiment, it becomes a very like shared common language of okay, I know exactly how to
It's the lenient
work with these.
column.
Yeah, it's like that's what I want. I want to know. What was the accuracy? I can filter by trial types very easily, and it makes it much more. I think it's a lot simpler to share data amongst labs because we don't have to really document very heavily what the hell's going on in our data. We can just say, well, this column, these are the responses, and what you want to filter out is this is the trial type that we used for our final test.
I'm not sure I fully understood in terms of it's kind of easier to share data because there's this consistent formatting of the data. Is that the point? Yeah, okay.
So like people who used to do like surveys by hand, the way they enter them in their Excel spreadsheets are not going to line up at all between labs. But if you're using, okay, here's a common survey, it's in the collector, you can look at every lab the way they collected that survey, and their data would line right up with each other because they're all using the same format. And we don't have to enforce a general format. We just say, well, this is so easy to do, why would you do it any other way? And so the ease of use would almost kind of it's like the Trojan horse to the sharing of data is how easy it is to just collect your data. So people, even who just want to do surveys, this is a much better option for them. And they don't have to pay for SurveyMonkey.
I'm just a little concerned in terms of whether there's a risk of getting overwhelmed by... oh, actually, sorry. I was going to say getting overwhelmed by people using it if they kind of do see that this is better than SurveyMonkey in almost every way. But I was wondering whether there should be some degree of constraint in terms of...
I want to make an invite to begin with, so like if they're marketing people, like, hey, we're a marketing company, it's like, no, this is not designed to be free for a marketing company. This is meant to be for scientists.
Why not just make it free for academics? And you can always verify an academic by looking at their, just finding Google Scholar or their university webpage, and then anyone who's not academic has a charge for using.
I like that.
Or using surveys.
Especially because we can do it. We could still do it cheaper than SurveyMonkey. We can be like, oh, your account is $10 a year, and you can run, you can collect 50,000 people, which would be easy enough to handle across a year.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting $10 for 150,000, then that's up quite nicely.
Yeah. And it's a very low load on us, like making these things. Because doesn't your server trial type, Tyson, also do a lot of stuff in the trial itself? Like it doesn't hit the server as hard as the other trial types.
I mean, it does a little bit of work calculating the trial type, so that actually is a bit of work just assembling the HTML, but then it's on the user's page for a minute and a half. So rather than having a trial every 5 seconds and where you're constantly rebooting everything, you calculate the entire survey, send that to them, and then they fill out the whole thing and send it back, and then you just record it. So it's got, rather than intermittent little peaks, it's got 2 big peaks, but they're separated by the entire duration of the survey, so it's still easy to handle for the server.
Okay.
But yeah, servers are a PHP thing, so they do have some server load, but it's just the fact that you only have to do it once per survey, and then you collect 20 responses.
And I already own psychcollector.com, so that could be our URL.
Yeah. Cool. I'm just thinking, there's one other thing I want to ask you about. Oh yeah, I'll just put it here. You guys, I think you guys obviously would have more to say about explaining how collector works and giving a bit more detail into it. So I kind of I think now. So if you wouldn't mind contributing to this chunk here, just talking about collector in a bit more detail than what I've done.
Hey, where is this? Oh, okay, sure. Oh, the little reddish thing there, or pink, I guess.
Oh, it's red because I'm highlighted now. But,
oh, okay. Yeah, so we can fill that out.
Yeah, if you could do that. But I think over the next week, otherwise I'm happy to kind of tidy this up and build on it. One thing I've mentioned, which I've only which might be a bit cheeky to bring into this proposal, considering I've only thrown one Slack comment on it, is the idea that we would embed something like rfiddle into Collector, which I think is totally doable, but obviously it's easy to think it's doable until you do it and then realize the obstacles. So I'm just kind of asking whether you think it might be worth holding off on talking about that as a plan for the future, or whether you think it's sufficiently credible that we can say this is what we're going to do, and this is kind of just another part of how we go promote open science.
I mean, I think it's a good thing to say, like, hey, this is one of our, like, you know, almost like what is it, Kickstarter? They have those stretch goals. It's like, if we can get more money, this is the direction we're headed. Because I think a lot of it is telegraphing, like, here's what we care about. Like, this is really, we're trying to sort of build these same things that the open science people are. Like, we really want it to be free. We want it to be easier. We want to make it easy to share data. We want to make it more transparent in, like, how you got from data to figures.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's cool. I mean, that's to me is legitimate in terms of, yeah, if you give a sense of where you want to go in the future, that makes, I mean, it's where we do, it's where I definitely want to kind of do some work on that when I get time to do. So yeah, cool. I'll leave it then.
All right. And at the bottom, you guys should read this thing. So at the very bottom of this Google Doc, I have a header ridiculous script. So I woke up in the middle of the night one day, and I was like, I'm going to write a script for what could be a video to pitch Collector, and I just imagined, like, someone will edit this together with showing you stuff. But it's like a ridiculous, like, late-night sales pitch at the end. I'm like, how much would you pay for this? $50,000. Yeah, it was like, this was like 3 a.m. waking up and be like, oh, I have an idea. This should be a video. I fell down, then fell asleep and woke up the next morning. It's like, oh my god, I must have been really tired because some of this is pretty silly. Especially near the end, you can tell how tired I'm getting. Like in all caps, I wrote "Collector is free as in beer and speech and Willie."
Yeah, that's where I was at.
Yeah, it's a pretty great script.
I was actually reading it earlier when you put it up. And it was like talking about you can punch the keyboard, and I was just thinking, like, if I show this to Alan, is he gonna like disown me? He's like, oh, you're not serious about this, Grant? Fuck off.
I'm super serious. I'm kind of annoyed in general at like the seriousness of the academic tone. Like they're kind of like, oh, I'm a robot who doesn't feel things. It's like, no, you're not. Even if you pretend to be that robot, you're still not that person. Like, you're fooling nobody. You're still a weird human.
I actually prefer people keeping emotion out of their research. Like I don't need to. Don't stir me into thinking that you're interesting. Just present your data, and I will decide if it's interesting.
I think I'm not
Mm.
about keeping emotion out. I just think that people shouldn't pretend like they don't have biases or, things that they wanted to happen. Like, when you run all your studies, you're like, well, I hoped I found something. Like, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean I'm going to put a thing there that isn't there, but that's why I did this study. Like, we don't do these things with no expectations. We expect to find something, and we don't find it. We go, that's weird, or that's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I put up this ridiculous thing. At some point, I want to turn this into something, maybe. I don't know, depending on how silly it feels. But I know at the time it felt really funny.
Well, if we get through the first round of this, then you might get a chance to give a speech. 'Cause,
I imagine it more like those every stupid tech website where they're like, what is our new thing? It is the
Yeah.
greatest whatever, and there's like a silly stick figure man and animations that don't make any sense with whatever their product is, and their product ends up being this really just asinine thing, and you're like, how was this supposed to be making the world better? It's very Silicon Valley.
What was that website that you were showing me, Mikey, that we spent a while looking over, and it's talking about how it's for revolutionizing everything, but we have no idea what they do.
Oh, it was some marketing. It was like one of those marketing firms where you hire them to they're like, we do digital, social, mobile branding for your conglomerate's efficient, connection with youth, something. And we just read to the very end of the site, and we're like, I still don't even know what I would get. Like, if I gave these people money, I have no idea what they do with it, other than generate more buzzwords. But it was like the most marketing-ass thing I've ever seen. I was just like, this is totally insane. I cannot even parse any logic out of this. Like, it was a content-free string of buzzwords for an entire web page. But it was like beautifully animated. Like, every time you'd scroll, things would swing in from the left and the right, and stuff would flip around. And I'm like, I'm not even sure what this company is. Like, I presume they were a web design company, but they kept saying they were about marketing. But yeah, that's the crazy world.
I just realized another thing. I remember you showing us something a few months ago, Mikey, where it was a website that some vague. It was not too well. There were similarities with what we're doing.
JS
Oh yeah,
Psych?
yeah,
So what's
JS
it?
Psych.
Okay, yeah. Well, you can just.
So
You
they're
need
on
the URL for it.
Yeah, where are they?
I was thinking I would fork off them and build them a sheet style input like we use. Like here's a CSV that defines your trial types. As if he basically has built trial types. The only thing is he doesn't have a way of tying that back into a server or a way of feeding information into it other than JavaScript. And so you are kind of left to your own devices to make a server that records responses. And he has some guides like, oh, if you have a PHP server, here's how you do it. But it doesn't come downloaded with JSPsych. JSPsych is just the sort of front end half of it. And I don't think
And
it'd be hard to build the back end for him.
So this is actually this is slightly different to the. Well, this is another one. There was one where it seemed like you could run JavaScript experiment on the person's website. Is this
The
the same?
Cyturk. So
Cyturk.
here's this thing where it's like the tape deck analogy. They had like, oh, you can do pieces of people's tasks.
That's what it's throwing in there because there's the whole section on competition. So
Yeah.
we'll just put Cyturk as something to think about. There's one where it looked like it looked kind of professional.
Oh, Cognitlab?
That could be right.
They're the ones that are charging you. I think it's like a few $100s for the license. I mean, it seemed very similar to ePrime. I remember when I looked at the pricing, I think it was $800 for a lab license, and then they also took a cut of your MTurk money. Like, you basically need to pay them for MTurk credits, and then that buys you a fraction. Like, if you give them $1, they give you 90 cents worth of MTurk money, and that was the only way to run.
Yeah. So it sounds like I'm just ignoring what you're saying. I think it was another one. It was a different one. It's good that we got all these there.
Yeah, but there's a few of them. I'm trying to think who else is there.
I mean, the good thing is it's good to have the ones where you have to pay them. that makes it it looks even better. But there was one where it was kind of like, this is really bad way to describe it, but it looks like semi-professional, like a really, really good university student made it, rather than a company. Don't know if that rings.
That still sounds like JS Psych.
Yeah, I'm thinking that.
Maybe I'm just not recognizing the JS like front page. I just need to go.
Where's their page?
Let's have a look. Session.
Oh.
So I'm thinking
Almost.
you could. Maybe this is the one. Yeah, I'm looking at JS Psych now. I mean,
I remember thinking this was cool, but it's very, very programmy.
yeah.
Which is
Okay.
something we could build a backend for. Like, I don't think it would be too hard for one of us to be like, okay, I see that this is a trial type that needs this in the settings column. Bam, done.
Yeah.
But I don't have time.
No, I think it is JS Psych actually. The more I look at it, it's just the front page threw me. And for some reason, I thought I remember that being able to run experiments off the website.
Oh, so they actually had like demos there. Did he have JS Psych demos?
I don't remember.
Oh, it's jspsych.org. Did we write .com in there? Oh no, you got .org.
Yeah.
Oh, Cognilab is $400 a year for a license. Who's using Cognilab at UCLA?
Oh, we need to talk to them.
I know. It's like, oh, I'm at UCLA. I want to talk to the current users. So I want to see how I can use it too. And then go to them and be like, dude, stop using it. You're wasting $400. So Cognilab is also, well, I guess I'll tell you guys after. But okay, are we mostly? I guess we're through the stuff we really wanted to talk about, right?
Yeah, no, I think I'm good to go with what we've discussed.
All right, so I'm gonna go in this online thing. I'll tell you guys some stuff.